In this video, we'll be using the product rule of radicals to simplify the expressions. Let's take a look at our first example. Use the product rule of radicals to simplify the following expression. Square root of 4 times 25. In this case, we have the radical of a product, so we're going to use the rule and rewrite this one as the product of radicals. So we have the square root of 4 times the square root of 25. Now let's simplify each of those square roots. So square root of 4 is equal to 2 and the square root of 25 is equal to 5. So we have the product 2 times 5, which happens to be 10. So we can say therefore the square root of 4 times 25 is equal to 10. And we can actually verify this result as follows. We also happen to know that the square root of 4 times 25 is equal to the square root of 100, and we happen to know that this is equal to 10. So notice we actually get the same result as before. Let's see another example here. Use the product rule of radicals to simplify the following expression. The square root of 3x to the 5th times the square root of 12x. Well, now notice that here you actually have the product of two radicals, so we can rewrite this one as the radicals of product. So we can say this is the square root of 3x to the 5th times 12x. Now we're going to multiply the coefficients. So we have 3 times 12 gives you 36. So we have the square root of 36 times x to the 5th times x. Now keep in mind there's an implicit 1 here, so I'm going to actually write it out in this moment. And now, because we have the same basis here with the x's, we're going to keep the base and add up the exponents. So this becomes the square root of 36 times x to the 5 plus 1. Or in other words, you just have the square root of 36 times x to the 6. Now, this time around, we're now going to change the radical of the product to the product of radicals. So we can say this is the same as the square root of 36 times the square root of x to the 6. And notice the square root of 36 is 6, and the square root of x to the 6, we're going to write it as the square root of x to the 3rd squared. Now notice 3 times 2 gives you the power of 6, so these are equivalent. And now we can actually cancel the square root with the square. So this turns out to just be 6x cubed. So we can say as a conclusion here that the product of the square root of 3x to the 5th and the square root of 12x is equal to simply 6x cubed. Let's take a look at another example here. Example 3. Use the product rule of radicals to simplify the following expression. Square root of 4x times the quantity square root of 12x plus the square root of 4x cubed. So here we're going to apply the distributive property. So we're going to have to distribute the square root of 4x. And notice we're going to end up with the square root of 4x times the square root of 12x plus the square root of 4x times the square root of 4x cubed. Now using the product rule, we can actually write the product of the radicals as the radical of the products. So this is equal to the square root of 4x times 12x plus the same applies here. We have the product of two radicals, so we can rewrite it as the radical of the product. So we can say the square root of 4x times 4x cubed. Now here we're going to multiply the coefficients first. So we have the square root of 4 times 12 is 48. And then you just have times x under the radical as well. Plus the square root of 4 times 4 is 16. And then you have x times x to the 3rd. Now let's go ahead and simplify this further. So we can say that this is equal to the square root of 48. Notice you have x times x, that's just x squared, plus the square root of 16. Now keep in mind that there's an implicit 1 here. Let me write it out. Since we have the product of the same base, we're going to keep the base of x and we're going to just add up the exponents. So this is x to the 1 plus 3. And again, rewriting this it becomes the square root of 48 x squared plus the square root of 16 x to the fourth power, because 1 plus 3 gives you 4. Okay, now we're going to try to simplify this as much as we can. So keep in mind that we're going to factor out some of the terms inside the radical. So in this case, 48 is the same as 16 times 3. So we can say that this is the square root of 16 times 3 times x squared, plus, then here we're going to rewrite the radical as follows: radical 16 times radical x to the fourth. Okay, now we have a product, so we're going to rewrite it as the product of radicals. So this is going to be the same as the square root of 16 times the square root of 3 times the square root of x squared, plus, in this case, we're going to leave it as the square root of 16 times the square root of x to the fourth. We can rewrite it as x squared quantity squared. Notice that the 2 times the 2 give you still the power of a 4. Okay, now the square root of 16 is equal to 4, so we have 4 square root of 3 here. The square root and the square cancel out, so that's just x, plus the square root of 16 is 4. And again, the square root and the square cancel out here, so that's just x squared. And that's the actual product that we were interested in. So that's how we can actually use the product rule of radicals to simplify expressions. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.